You're watching The Citizen Report. Real, in-depth American.
Welcome to The Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon. Thank you for joining me tonight. As always, this newscast is real, in-depth American. It's always good to be back here with you. Thank you so much for joining me. So a lot has obviously happened since the last time I joined you. We have the government shutdown has now officially ended, at least for now. I believe it's only a matter of months until we might be back in the same situation again. But while all of this was taking place with respect to the government shutdown and all of that sort of thing and all the chaos that has ensued, something has happened, and it has been making the rounds in even the mainstream Mockingbird media, but I don't think it's getting enough coverage in the way that it should, because it's not being given the scrutiny that, frankly, it should be given. So some of y'all may be aware of this, but Apple has now announced that they are releasing a digital ID. Now, contrary to what some people seem to think, this is far from the first one that Apple has put out there. This is just the latest, if you will, installment of the ongoing digital ID matrix that they're setting up. And so really, truly is one small step for man, one giant leap towards the mark of the beast. Now, let me just say here at the outset, this is definitely not the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast, it's clearly said in Scripture what it is, and this this is not that. However, what we can say is the mark of the, basically we can look at the sign of the times such as this, and we can definitely see that they are creating this control matrix, and we're continuing to step forward closer and closer to potentially something like the mark of the beast. But I want to just first show my audience exactly what this is. So if you go under if you have an iPhone, if you go under the wallet app and you tap on the little plus sign to add something new to the wallet app, it will bring you to this page basically. And I'll try to do this in a way that y'all can see it there. But basically, you'll want to go under driver's license and ID cards. And then after that, and this is what I meant by this is not the first thing that they were doing, they already have a number of states that have already put out their own sort of digitalized version of identification. Now what we have on the federal level is literally called digital ID. So if you tap right here at the very top, it's under United States, you tap digital ID and it brings you to this rather eerie page, I might even say. It's certainly a very bizarre looking kind of page. And this is where it talks about digital ID. And I'll just read what it says on there for you. It says, use your U.S. passport to create a digital ID that can be used to book flights or hotels, pass through TSA checkpoints for domestic travel, open new accounts, and more. Now, they're touting this as a convenient way for you to, get through TSA faster. And in fact, I'll just bring it up on screen real quick. Basically, if you haven't been flying lately, you wouldn't probably know much of anything about this, but I have flown, not in the very, not very recently, but I have flown in the last year. And when you go through TSA, you hand them your ID, like, this passport, for example, and you are asked to stand in front of a camera, and it's literally scanning your face. It's not just taking a picture. As I understand it, it's literally scanning biometrics. So, and don't think for a second, despite what they say, I don't believe for 1 second that stuff ever truly goes away off their servers, but I digress. But let's go to, so actually this first of all is the Apple page touting the digital ID, a new way to create and present an ID in Apple Wallet. So now Google, as I understand, has their own counterpart to it, and this is what theirs says: get quick, reliable access to your digital IDs all in one place. Now let's go to, as I was saying earlier, TSA, what they're saying here. So basically, and I'll just take this full if I can, And basically what they're saying here is you can now use your digital ID at more than 250 airports to verify your identity at TSA checkpoints through platforms such as Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, and Samsung Wallet, or a state-issued app. So here's what they probably don't really want you to know, is that participation is optional. If you choose to participate in TSA's use of these technologies, your picture will be taken and compared to your physical or digital ID. To use a digital ID at any of the 250 plus airports, add your acceptable state-issued eligible driver's license or identification card to your phone using a TSA-approved digital ID app or to your phone's digital wallet. So this is what they're saying from the TSA's point of view, and this is kind of like a drawing there on the left-hand side. And let me just blow this up bigger so you can see it a little bit better. And this is basically an illustrative representation of what it may look like at the airport. So quite literally, you see like a portrait shaped screen basically, and you have this picture taken of you. Now if that's not Orwellian enough. So Peggy Hall, the Healthy American, she's also known as the Healthy American, she's done some excellent exposés regarding Real ID and this digital ID matrix that they're sort of webbing this web of digital identification. And I'm going to leave it to her to, in your own free time, to go look at what she has to say there. I like what she has to say on many different topics, and she does it from a Christian point of view. So I strongly recommend you go check her out like I said, in your free time. But one thing she mentioned on one or more of her episodes, and I want to bring this up, is the company called IDEMIA. Now, IDEMIA is not just, your run-of-the-mill, technological company. It turns out that they actually quite literally make many of the driver's licenses around the country. And the reason I mention this is because this whole matrix system that we're seeing taking place, it really all is a matter of control. And this is on Wikipedia. Take with a grain of salt because it is Wikipedia, but this is what it says. IDEMIA provides products to various federal and state government entities in the United States and is the leading provider in the issuance of driver's licenses. IDEMIA owns Identigo, a company that operates hundreds of storefronts in the United States, which offers state-of-the-art electronic fingerprint capture capabilities, as well as other identity-related products and services. Identigo is an authorized service provider for the United States federal government, and as such provides identity verification services for multiple Transportation Security Administration programs, including TSA PreCheck and the Transportation Worker Identification Credential. And basically, and this is the key phrase, and is the leading provider in the issuance of driver's licenses. So when you get a driver's license, and I really wonder now, in these states, I know here in Tennessee it happened, in my former home state of North Carolina, they did it there. It got to a point where they stopped issuing driver's licenses there on the spot. They gave you a paper, sort of like a temporary license that was, an interim thing, basically, to represent your driver's privileges. But basically, they would send out from a centralized location, and it would be something that would purportedly come from the state government. But, I wonder if that's actually IDEMIA right there. So it's a very, very interesting thing and a very eerie thing. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up to begin with is because we are continuing to see this push towards centralization of your identification. You talk about the Agenda 2030, the 15-minute cities, all of those type of things. Now, what does that, let's go back to the passport for a second. So the digital ID that you have, if you put it on your phone, I think that's stupid, to be perfectly frank about it, because for me, I'm old school. Now, I'm 29 years old, but I'm pretty old school when it comes to this. And in fact, when it comes to my passport, every time I have gone in, visited another country, I have, at least up to this point, have managed to get a passport stamp for that said country. Like in, earlier, well, once last year, once this year, I went to Canada, for example, and by default now everything is very automated and very, very streamlined. But despite that, I voluntarily asked to have my passport stamped. So I'm very old school. I know some countries they don't stamp anymore. Other countries like Canada will stamp, but only on request, basically, at least for U.S. citizens. So, but the reason I say all this is to say I'm not telling my audience to not participate in the digital ID stuff. And I obviously don't want to be a hypocrite about it either, because I had an experience last year when I was coming back from the Philippines, when I took a trip there and produced a film that you can go watch on YouTube. And basically, when I was flying back, I flew into LAX, Los Angeles, and the way it kind of worked is I had to go through customs and immigration, entering the United States, collect my bags, or my check bag, and then I had to basically go back through TSA all over again. And when I was going through the TSA part of it, I had this lady, basically coax me into, going over to this kiosk that was not the main TSA line, and convinced me to sign up for this, what's called Clear. Now, let me bring that up just briefly so you understand what I'm, basically referencing, at least the company I'm talking about. So Clear basically has these gates, or I should say kiosks, that basically scan I think it's your iris, I'm not really sure, but certainly your biometrics. And then what they claim is at certain airports, you can bypass the main TSA line and all that stuff. Now, I didn't keep that in part because I, began to more fully understand what that all kind of entailed, but also because, frankly, it costs money to be on there. So I had like this free trial thing, and I ended up, not keeping it. But I used that thing only one time, and after that, basically I flew that, not to make the story too long, but basically I flew that day to Atlanta, spent the night in Atlanta, and then the next morning I caught another flight to come up here. I wasn't living in Knoxville at the time, but I flew up to Knoxville to visit my mom before I would fly home to Charlotte. But basically I used Clear one time after signing up in Atlanta. The smaller airports such as, even I don't believe Charlotte has Clear, and Knoxville certainly doesn't have Clear, but all that to say, all these different things collect biometrics, and I would say it's definitely, I'm not saying it's the mark of the beast, because it's not, but we can see that we're just getting closer and closer and closer to something like the mark of the beast, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to the deep state trying to assert total control over your very movement. So it's very important to be aware of these things, and at least for me, I'm personally not going to participate in the electronic passport, because like I said, I'm old school. I like having the physical ID card, the identification, I should say. And, if I fly over to another country, if the option's available, I like to get my passport stamped. So, but, and they tout this as domestic only. So you have to carry your passport anyway outside the United States. But this is a terribly bad idea. But the fact that they're pushing this is rather interesting, the timing of it all, because we did see how airports they're going to try to change the standards of transit in airports to where you actually do not even get so much as a paper printout of your ticket. I believe it was Ryanair. I believe that's an airline over in Europe. By default, they've announced they're not even going to provide passengers with a printout of their boarding pass. And after some controversy, they basically said, okay, well, if you cannot get, basically brought on your phone, basically, or something. I forget what they said, but basically they will make an exception and print those out. But by standard, they expect you to now have that on your phone. So they're trying to move everyone and everything onto your phone. And if you really think about it, it doesn't take so much to go from that to a little chip in your body. And I know that, I don't know if it was Sweden or one of those countries, so they're already trying to push that, the chip stuff. So, and of course you will have those that go right along with it and think nothing of it. But, you need to be cognizant and aware that they're quite literally trying to hijack your identity and control your identity. And I'll just mention this in passing, that in the United States, probably many of y'all know this, but some of y'all may not know this. But it's important to understand that the United States, we used to, the 13 original colonies used to be part of Great Britain. And our law, the foundations of our law it's the common law. And the common law is essentially English law. And basically over the last couple of centuries, we went from a situation where, for example, to change your name, it was very informal, and you basically had liberty to do as you pleased with that, to where now it's basically you have to go before a judge, and they say you nominally have this common law right still. California specifically still enshrines that in their statute that retains the common law right to change your own name. But this is a publication, like an academic paper that was released a number of years ago. It's from UCLA, called "The Right to Control One's Name." And let me just put this up on screen because I think this is kind of telling right here. And the reason I'm mentioning this is I do have a personal bias for this issue because I've done a lot of research into this, but also because, frankly, this does tie in some way to what we're now dealing with these digital ID versus, the traditional ID. So in this academic paper, The Right to Control One's Name, basically it says historically Anglo-American naming practices were far less formal and less regulated than they are today. Surnames did not become necessary until the 14th century when they started to be picked and applied at random. A man's physical, mental, or moral characteristics, his occupation, or his place of residence, even his real or fancied resemblance to an animal, supplied a myriad surnames which still exist. These were at first merely temporary, not always lasting as long as the lives of the person so named, and were not transferred to descendants. By the reign of Elizabeth I, beginning in 1558, surnames had become static and hereditary in England. However, naming practices remained flexible. Historical flexibility in naming practices is reflected in the establishment early on of a common law right to change names without petition to the state. In theory, although not, as I will later discuss in practice, at common law even today, a person may change names without state assistance. After sufficient time and consistent use by the named person and others, the new name becomes the person's legal name. So, I read a bit of it, but it kind of goes on into, sort of the historical versus contemporary. But all that to say is that there was a time when you wanted to control your identity, change your name, for example, you just kind of did it. That's what we now today call a common law name change. It's also referred to as at will or name change by usage. And this ties so well into what we're talking about. And some people may not get the connection, and I understand that. But the reality is, incrementally, they have over time clamped down on your person. You are made in the image of God. You are an image bearer of God, made in his image. And thus, they want to now control your identity to the point they now want to put it into an electronic device. And frankly, they want they just want to control every aspect of your life. They want to know where you're at all the time. They want to know everything about you. And it's absolutely ridiculous. So I just want my audience to be cognizant of these things and to not be naive, to not be deceived by way of being ignorant to these things. We know that in order to kind of get to the end, truly the end of the end times, a lot of these different things have to take place. And, going back to name changes for a second, they'll use one false flag after another to justify, more and more of this stuff. For example, they'll say, 9/11, we need to make it harder for people we need to have more stringent standards for identification. So what did they do? They created Real ID. And Real ID, it's just like Affordable Care Act. It's unaffordable. Patriot Act is unpatriotic, and Real ID is, IDs before they were real, but, it's as if to imply everything before, basically, present day, all the former driver's licenses, passports, what have you, or not passports, but driver's license, state IDs, etc., that they weren't truly real because they weren't made to federal standards. So all that, again, to say is that you need to be aware of what the deep state's trying to do and understand your rights. You don't have to comply with this. And again, like I said earlier, I'm not saying that this is the mark of the beast. If you choose to upload your passport details into your iPhone or what have you, that's your prerogative and that's your right to do that. But for me, there's just a limit to what I'm willing to do, at least right now. And, granted, to be honest, I have my credit debit cards, most of them, stored in my phone as, for Apple Pay. And Apple Pay, I will concede, is a very convenient way to pay for things. The problem with that is, that too is a control mechanism. There's a lot of ways they can, monitor and control you. So just be aware that this is not just some random, things happening. This is all about working incrementally to, constrict you, as Amanda Grace would say. Maybe not in this context, but I'll use the phrase. It's like the spirit of Pythos. It grabs on and it just clamps down. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, is that you're seeing your liberties, your freedoms continually being eroded. And it goes completely, runs in, amok. It runs in the face of that Bible verse. It's a very true Bible verse. It's one of my favorite passages of Scripture. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. So that is the essence of liberty in its truest form, in its purest form. So I just wanted to do this episode today to talk about this for a little bit. Hopefully this all kind of makes sense. Like I said, there's other people that talks about this, kind of stuff more, perhaps in a more deeper way, like Peggy Hall. She really does these deep dives and kind of connects the dots. So I, again, would recommend that you go in your free time to The Healthy American on YouTube and check out her videos, especially on Real ID, because there's a lot of stuff there, a lot of good material there to talk about. And I'll leave that to people like her to talk about on that kind of level. So on that note, God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for watching The Citizen Report. Don't forget the website, thecitizenreport.net. That's where you can go to get all the links for The Citizen Report. So make sure you subscribe here on YouTube, on my personal YouTube channel here, Jonathan Shannon. Go to The Citizen Report on Rumble. Rumble for now is kind of our backup way of basically, if something happens here on YouTube, it's basically the fallback position if need be. So, and I still upload most episodes to Rumble as well. So God bless each and every one of you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next time. Have a great night, everyone.